Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Vijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Brajadana Randana Yasodanandana Brajadana Randana Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Govinda, 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 Radha Ramana, Hare Govinda, Jaya Jaya, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Jaya Gora Nitai, Jaya Gora Nitai, Jaya Gora Nitai, Jaya Gora Nitai, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 5. Narada Muni cursed by Prajapati Daksha. And this is text number 17. Pancha Vimsa Shati Tatvanam Pancha Vimshati Tatvanam Purushod Darpanaha Purushod Darpanaha Bhuta Darpanaha Ajatmam Abudasyeha Ajatmam Abudasyeha Kimasat Karmabir Bhavet Kimasat Karmabir Bhavet Panchavimshati Tatvanam Purushod Bhuta Darpanaha Ajatmam Abudasyeha Kimasat Karmabir Bhavet Panchavimshati Tatvanam Purushod Bhuta Darpanaha Ajatmam Abudasyeha Kimasat Karmabir Bhavet Panchavimshati Tatvanam Purushod Bhuta Darpanaha Ajatmam Abudasyeha Kimasat Karmabir Bhavet. You want to try? Vimshati 25. Tattvanam of the elements. Purushaha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Adbhuta Darpanaha, the Wonderful Manifester. Ajatmam, the Overseer of all causes and effects. Abudasya, of one who does not know. Iha, in this world. Kimasat karma bir bhavet. What can be the benefit of engaging in temporary fruitive activities? Narada Muni had said, translation, Narada Muni had said that there is a house made of 25 elements. The Haryashvas understood this analogy. The Supreme Lord is the reservoir of all 25 elements, and as the Supreme Being, the conductor of cause and effect. He causes their manifestation. If one engages in temporary fruitive activities, not knowing that the Supreme Person, what benefit will he derive? In response, please. Narada Muni had said that there is a house made of 25 elements. The Haryashvas understood this analogy. The Supreme Lord is a reservoir of 25 elements. And as the Supreme Being, the conductor of cause and effect, he causes their manifestation. If one engages in temporary fruitive activities, not knowing that the Supreme Person, what benefit will he derive? Taught by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Philosophers and scientists conduct scholarly research to find the original cause, but they should do so scientifically, not whimsically or through fantastic theories. Science of original cause is explained in various Vedic literatures. Atota Brahma Jigyasa, Janmadyasya Yataha. The Vedanta Sutra explains that one should inquire about the Supreme Soul. Such inquiry about the Supreme is called Brahma Jignasa. The Absolute Truth, Tattva, is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam 1-11. Vedanti Tattva Vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmati paramatmati bhagavan iti shabdite. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. The absolute truth appears to neophytes as impersonal Brahman and to advanced mystic yogis as Paramatma, the Supersoul. But devotees who are further advanced understand the absolute truth as the Supreme Lord, Vishnu. This material cosmic manifestation is an expression or an expansion of the energy of Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu. Ekadesha Sistaksyagner Jyotsna Vishtarini Yata Parashi Brahmana Shaktis Tatedam Akilam Jagat. Whatever we see in this world is but an expansion of various energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is like a fire that spreads illumination for a long distance, although it is situated in one place. Vishnu Purana. The entire cosmic manifestation is an expansion of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, if one does not conduct research to find the Supreme Cause, but instead falsely engages in frivolous temporary activities, what is the use of demanding recognition as an important scientist or philosopher? If one does not know the ultimate cause, what is the use of scientific and philosophical research? The Purusha, the original person, Bhagavan, Vishnu, can be understood only by devotional service. Bhaktya mam abhigyanati yavan yast chasmi tatvataha. Only by devotional service can one understand the Supreme Person who is behind everything. One must try to understand that the material elements are the separated inferior energy of the Lord, and that the living entity is the Lord's spiritual energy. Whatever we experience, including matter and the spiritual soul, the living force is but a combination of two energies of Lord Vishnu, the inferior energy and the superior energy. One should seriously study the facts concerning creation, maintenance, and devastation, as well as the permanent place from which one never need return. Yad gatvana nivartante. Human society should study this, but instead of culturing such knowledge, people are attracted to temporary happiness and sense gratification, culminating in bottomless, topless passion. There is no profit in such activities. One must engage himself in the Krishna conscious movement. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyanandina Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pastachari Chacharine. So there are different processes for understanding the absolute truth. And, there are 6 philosophies in life. Let's explain them to you. First one is, well, they're not the first one, but Patanjali Muni. Is any yogis here? Anybody been practicing yoga? Patanjali, he wrote the Yoga Sutras. And in Bhagavad Gita is mentioned that he brought up the theory of pleasure. And all the impersonalists were actually felt this was wrong because they didn't like that at all. Because if there's pleasure, it means there has to be a recipient of pleasure from another source. And so it means, personality. can a piece of wood feel pleasure? It's like that. And so Patanjali was a personalist, and but his goal was something concocted in the mind. He understood the process of yoga, which was all bona fide. But this is what happens in yoga, is that we may misunderstand what we're actually trying to achieve. Then there was Gautama, Nyaya. Nyaya means logic. So Gautama and Canada is the other one. He's the author of the compiler of Vaisheshika philosophy. And both these two say that the atom is the cause of everything. In other words, they're gross materialists. They don't understand what's behind, that the spirit soul is behind. So, and then there's Jaimini. Does anybody know what Jaimini was the proposer of? Karma Mimamsa. Lord Krishna speaks about this in the Krishna book. When he's talking about when Nanda Maharaj was actually preparing for performing the Indra Puja. And so Lord Krishna came and he said, what are you doing, And, Nanda Maharaj thought, what will he understand? He's only a young child. But he persisted. And when Nanda Maharaj said he was performing this so that Indra would be pleased and send rains, he started proposing this karma mimamsa philosophy, which means that work will produce results and there's no other cause. And that, if there is a Supreme Lord, he has to, if we do the work, he has to provide. So, in other words, this is also an atheistic philosophy. And this is Jaimini. And then there was, who's next? Kapila Muni. There's two Kapilas. There's one atheist, but in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada talks about the real Kapila, and there's a whole section of the Bhagavatam about Kapila Muni's philosophy. And the Shankar philosophy means that, let's just look what I've put here, Kapila. No, here we are. It says material nature is the cause of the material world. So I don't know which Kapila he's talking about here. It must be, it can't be the incarnation of the Lord Kapila, can it? Because he was preaching about, devotional service. But anyway, this Kapila, he talks about that the material nature is the cause of the material. It's similar that everything comes from the atom. And so these five philosophies are all either atheistic or impersonalistic. And there's only Vyasadeva who commented on Vedanta Sutra, who gives the personal commentary. And this is actually very well documented in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, the process of yoga by Patanjali, this is, we're talking about we should search for the absolute truth. Well, first of all, there's the impersonal process. The impersonal process means that, what's that word? Pantastakoti satavatsara sampragamyo vayaratape manaso munipungavanam so pyachiyad papadasimya vachinchatat ve govindam adipurusham tamaham. When Lord Brahma appeared from the body of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and after he performed tapasya, then he got Lord Vishnu's darshan, and he chanted the prayers called the Brahma Samhita. And the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness is in a nutshell in those scriptures. And in this particular verse where I quoted, he's talking about the atheistic approach or the impersonal approach. And he said, Pantastiko tisata vatsara sampragamyo vayara tapi. He says, we can try to understand Krishna by traveling at the speed of mind for millions and millions of years, millions and millions of births. He said, we won't even come close. He says, so, we shouldn't follow that process. Then he said, vayara tapi manaso manipungavanam. That, we can perform mystic yoga. And he says, after drilling the respiration, he says, controlling the breathing, so many things to do, sitting in the right posture. First thing, we sit in the right posture, then the air's flow, then we breathe, and like that. He says, then maybe we can come to the point of touching the lotus toe of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so these are, long-winded processes. But I'd like to explain this process of yoga because it's very well delineated by Kapila Muni. And it's very well delineated also in Bhagavad Gita, because it's actually the process, the internal process of approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then we can compare it with Bhakti Yoga and where Bhakti Yoga comes in. And so, I think I mentioned this in the first class, didn't I, about Ashtanga Yoga. About first there's Yama. Remember? Yama means those things that we avoid, we neglect to do, like we follow illicit sex, meat eating, intoxicate. Well, a yogi, he forgoes all sex life completely, and then he practices this yoga. He avoids sex life and the 4 no-nos that we actually avoid: illicit sex, meat eating, gambling, intoxication. And then he performs niyama. Niyama means those things that are beneficial for going forward, things that he should do. And so this is the practice of yoga. He starts to meditate. But first of all, when we actually understand what we should avoid and what we should do, then we have to start the process of Ashtanga Yoga. First, sitting in this is sitting posture takes some mastering. And when the sitting posture is correct, the air's flowing in the body, and then the mind becomes peaceful, and the breathing process also starts to purify the soul. What comes next after asana? Pranayama. Oh, that's it. They're controlling the breathing. And then what's next? Pratyahara. It means, withdrawing the mind from all disturbing influences. And the yogi would go to the Himalayas or into the forest where there's actually nobody there to disturb him. He would lay kusha grass on the floor. He'd put a deer skin over it or some kind of skin. And that would keep the snakes and the tigers and everybody away. And then what comes next? We said pratyahara. What's the next one? Dhyana. Yeah, now we know what we should focus on. Oh, dharana. Dharana means what is the object we're trying to obtain? Focusing. Is it the super soul or is it something personal like that? And then we would meditate on that, dhyana. And then eventually that would come to the point of samadhi. And then beyond samadhi is sampati, not sampati. Sampati das, yeah. We talked about sampati yesterday. Sampati das. He was the brother of Jayatu also. But this is a different sampati. Sampati, what does sampati mean? It means then eventually we understand our position in relationship to Krishna and render service. But with devotional service, we come right in from the beginning and we go right up to, up to dhyana, focusing in on the holy name and meditating on the holy name. So everything else is taken care of. The Ashtanga Yoga, first of all, he has to work. Have you seen that section? Which first is work and then cessation of work in Bhagavad Gita. And he was thinking, I couldn't get my head around it. But then actually, I have one class by Burijan. He says, what happens is, it's like devotional service. Can you chant 64 rounds at the beginning? Or can you chant like Haridas Thakur all day? Anybody? Nobody can. And so we perform practical devotional service. And that practical devotional service keeps us engaged, the mind engaged. So a yogi wouldn't suddenly, sit down for like, a week and start meditating. It's not possible, is it? It takes practice. And so he would have to, he may sit for half an hour and then sit for a couple of hours. Then he performs some practical service. So this is called Yoga Rurukshu. And gradually will build his meditation up until he was actually meditating all the time. And he came to the perfection, Yoga Rudha. I know one devotee was on a train they were on the same course as me in the VIHE. And he came and he got a stick for this, we had this one seminar. Next year we had another seminar, and he came and he was limping. I said, what happened? He says, I was on a train from, I can't remember it well, but, probably quite a few 100 miles. He said, I was sat in one place for like nearly 10 hours in the half lotus position. He said, when I finished, I couldn't walk. A bit of fanatic, you know what I mean? When you do something, you have to do it really, get into it. But you can't do it, It was like that for a year. So, devotional service is a gradual process. Let's just go back to Ashtanga Yoga. Okay. I went to the Kumbh Mela actually in 1989 at Maha Kumbh Mela, and I think it was it second time to India, and I was going with traveling with Rohini Nandan and Rasamandal. They were two Prabhupada disciples, and then when we were on the plane, Rohini Nandan said, "I'm going to the Kumbh Mela." I didn't even know, because we were going to Vrindavan. He said, does anybody want to come? I said, I'll come. And so we got off the plane and we waited, and we got a train to Allahabad. Eventually we got there, and we were walking through this huge temporary, what can you say, when something's temporary village which had been built with tents. And, as far as the eye could see, there were just like thousands of these tents. These were all transcendentalists who'd come from all over India. And we saw so many sights just walking through the brief place that we went. And we saw yogis. One were been stood on one leg for like 3 years. He just had a crutch to lean on for his other side. And the others were, one had got his head buried in the soil, and it's been like that for I don't know how long. But he can't breathe when you go underground, obviously. But somehow or other, he was maintaining his life for us. We met others, a group of Westerners who were sat with him, Naga Babas, smoking a chill, and that were another. And then eventually we had this. We went in one tent. And there was nothing in it, just this other tent inside it. It was a huge tent. We thought there'd be so much inside, and there was nothing. Then we went in this little tent, and there were nothing in there either, just a table. I thought this must be an impersonalist tent or something, I don't know what they were trying to... I haven't worked it out to this day. And then we come out of the tent, we had this... all these austerities being performed. Then there were these Vishayis coming towards us, big sense enjoyers, the devotees, they were enjoying themselves like anything. So we joined in and we went back to the camp. So this is actually what, Patanjali's performed all those austerities to get us some semblance of happiness. And here it is, in the very beginning of devotional service, a youngish person can actually experience that. So this is Lord Chaitanya's mercy. And so, there's no comparison between Bhakti Yoga and devotional service. Actually, I've got a little chart here. Would you like to hear about it? I put some charts down for Bhakti Yoga versus other yogas. So if one goes through the whole process of yoga, we have to start at, where do we start, do you think? Where would we start? What Karma Kanda? I really want to enjoy my senses, but, I'll do it under regulation. That's most religions, isn't it? That's most religions. They want to enjoy the senses, but, okay, we'll at least acknowledge that we should do it a certain way. And in that way, we get our necessities to enjoy the senses. So that's a Karma Kanda. And then it comes to Sakam Karma Yoga. Sakam means that I want to enjoy my senses and I want to do it the way I want to do, but I'll surrender the results. I won't enjoy everything. I'll start to give the results for some higher cause. That can be impersonal or it can be personal. And then we come to the next stage, Nishkam Karma Yoga. Nishkam, what does Nishkam mean? I don't want to enjoy anything. I want to do it for a higher cause, but I want to do it the way I want to do it. I want to do what I'm good at or what I like doing. So we're becoming more renounced. And then next is Jnana Yoga. We get more knowledge and then we understand more about the impersonal aspect of the absolute truth. Or we meet a devotee and we get knowledge about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so then we'll either go to Ashtanga Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. And this is, then from Bhakti Yoga we can start to do what we are doing now. But the Express Yoga, it's, what is it? Can anybody tell me what the Express Yoga would be? Where would it start? Ado Shraddha, the Sadhu Sangha, the Bhajana Kriya, Anata Nivritishyat, Tato Rushit, Tata Ashaktis. What's it? Next one? Something Bhava, Premanjukanchati, Prema. So just by association of devotees, we're able to actually begin devotional service and make really rapid advancement. And that if we keep that association, then we'll always feel that impetus for going forward in devotional service. And then this is called Vairi Sadhana Bhakti. There's two kinds of sadhana bhakti. One is following rules and regulations, and the higher one is when it's spontaneous. Has anybody got any spontaneity yet? Put your hands up. Who's approaching spontaneity? We're all doing that, actually. We've all got some spontaneous things that we're attached to in devotional service. How could we do it? How is it possible? What are people doing in the material world? They spontaneously want to enjoy the senses as soon as they open their eyes, But a devotee, it may be there, but straight away we start following a process in an automatic way, which is, it actually loses its automatic tendency, doesn't it? It's because we've become a little attracted. And Prabhupada finds that. He says, when we come to see the temple, he said, take a flower, do something extra. Keep doing something extra. And gradually that spontaneity starts to come. And then, when spontaneity is there, we have a gradual period, which starts at Nishta, when we're fixed. Then there's it comes to Bhava Bhakti, which means preliminary stage of love of God. It means there's ecstasy, or we get a feeling of reciprocation with Krishna. We get that earlier, but it's actually intense. Bhava means feeling, mellow. And then when that devotional service becomes more intense, then eventually it comes to prema. And so this process is explained in the next of instruction. That what's the most important process of devotional service? It's Shravanam, isn't it? Hearing. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. Chanting and hearing. So when we hear, it starts Shravanadas. Remember this? Shravanadasa in next of instruction. And then it moves on to Varanadasa. Well, we may not be convinced, but if we keep hearing and chanting, we become, it says acceptance of the process, acceptance that, we want to actually approach Krishna. That may not be there in the beginning. And then what comes next? Shravanavasta, Shravan. Smaran, remembrance. And this is in, I think it's 5 different stages. There's intermittent. We sometimes remember the connection with Krishna. And as we practice, it becomes constant remembrance. And then it becomes meditative. And then it becomes completely meditative, is samadhi, or condensed. And then eventually some. So this is the processes. All this is carried out just by hearing. There's no austerity other than hearing, really. Well, that's an austerity, isn't it? But it's not easy to hear the philosophy. I remember there were one Mataji. I heard one class about one Mataji who would, in America, she'd got terminal cancer, and so they knew, and she was jolly. Nobody's jolly when they've got something terminal. Usually, are they? It's like whoa. But she was actually jolly because she was a devotee and she was actually confident. And the newspapers got to know about it. So they started in television actually as well. So they started, they interviewed her once, and when they saw her actually how she was reciprocating, they thought, we're going to follow this through and see where it goes. And so every week or every so often they come and interview her and talk to her. And she was just completely sat. She said, I wouldn't give up my position for anything in the 3 worlds. And she says, why? Because I'm able to just sit here and listen to my spiritual master and listen to this Shastras. She said, I'm getting so much satisfaction from just listening to Srila Prabhupada preach Krishna consciousness. I know I don't necessarily feel like that. When you hear Prabhupada, sometimes it's like he's saying the same thing as he said in every class nearly. If we're not careful, we're thinking like that. But when you really actually listen to Prabhupada's classes, they're actually really deep. Every point is philosophically backed up. And Prabhupada said that, when I said yesterday how Prahlad Maharaj was telling me that a lot of people fell asleep in his classes. And Prabhupada knew this, and he said, yes. He says, my classes are for my advanced devotees. For the advanced devotees. And so, we may want to read so many different books on devotional service, but, if we're really fixed in devotional service, we'll be satisfied by reading Prabhupada's books, because everything is in there, and it goes deeper and deeper the more we read. And what's that verse? What's that verse now? I can't remember it. It's a Bengali verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it says that one should not neglect to discuss this subject matter of Krishna consciousness, even though some points may be, what can we say, conflicting, contentious, argumentative. He says by discussing this philosophy, one becomes fixed in devotional service, convinced. And then when we become convinced, he says, we become attached to Krishna. And so this is the potency of just hearing. If we can't do anything else, we can just hear. This is the main thing. And if we hear properly, then, you know, all enthusiasm becomes prominent. So we can stop there a little bit earlier. Okay. Have we got any questions?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you. I just have a kind of practical question about the verse.
You have to speak up.
I have a question about the verse. At the beginning of these past few verses we've been reading, they've got some text in brackets, and I'm just wondering where that comes from.
It's got what?
At the start of the verse it says, Narada Muni had said there is a house made of 25 elements.
Yeah.
Where did this text in brackets come from? Because it's done it in the past few verses as well.
Narada Muni has spoken of a swan, no, that's the next one, of a house. What are you asking?
Well, I don't know if I've seen that part in the actual Sanskrit, so I just wonder where the text in the brackets has come from.
Well, let's go back a little bit. Maybe it starts with that, and it's just repeating it. You understand what I mean? It's because it said that. It's hearing these enigmatic words of Narada Muni, the Hariashvas consider them with their natural intelligence. So, if I remember right, if you go in text 6 through to 8, he actually goes through all these points in one verse. And then in the subsequent verses, he expands on them. So it's just repeating text 6 and 8. It's a good observation, because actually, I used to go door to door, and I came across a professor. He was a professor in religion at the University of Manchester, and he was a staunch Greek Orthodox. But he read a lot about Madhvacharya. And so when he saw me, come in. And he said, you know, I've read Bhagavad Gita by Prabhupada. He says, but I can't understand why when he puts in the purport, you know, it's not necessarily what's in the translation. It'll say, you know, the absolute truth. It doesn't mention Krishna. And so this is what, you know, we were saying, Nasta Prayeshu, Bhadreshu, in that way, that you need the book Bhagavat and you need the person Bhagavat, otherwise you just can't understand it. See, Bhagavad Gita, for instance, is written in such a way that, you know, it brings impersonalists into it as well. You know, it's written for everybody to bring them eventually to Krishna. And so it's written so that it's attractive to everybody. But it needs a devotee to actually explain it, like this Bhamati Paramatmati, Bhagavaniti Shabdite, is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. But most people don't understand Bhagavan. And so, it takes a pure devotee to explain it up to that point. Otherwise, people will explain up to the point that they actually understand. And so, it's not just book knowledge, Krishna leaves also a gap that if we want to actually leave it, there's also, look, it says here, this, I don't know, there's some evidence. So, when we're reading Shastra, we have to be a little patient. And that patience is that it'll have, as I said the other day, it'll be different. Prabhupada would say different things at different times to different people. But they were all actually correct and relevant because they were helping that person come to the next stage. So Shastra is like that. When we're going through Shastra and some contradictions, first of all, we have to understand which is the highest Shastra. There's the Puranas, but then Bhagavatam is the highest Purana. So what it says in a lower Purana is superseded by Srimad Bhagavatam. Who's speaking? What's his position in the order of transcendental knowledge? That's the next thing. What's the situation? Who's he speaking to? And what is the message that's being put across? And why? And so we naturally go through all these things and we talk to people, innit? We don't talk to everybody the same way. Do we? So that's what Bhagavatam is doing. You said?
I just had a comment on those brackets, but you already covered.
I
had a comment on those brackets, but you already covered.
Oh.
In terms of the Prabhupada for our benefit adds some words sometimes. That's all.
Yeah, it's called hermeneutics, this process. Hermeneutics. And hermeneutics is not necessarily applying to devotional practice or devotional philosophy, but it fits perfectly. And it's in line with our acharyas. If you read Prabhupada's book, the acharyas, especially Chaitanya Charitamrita, it explains about conversations which took place. And, when a person was defeated by another person, they would actually take him as guru. Because they followed Shastra very nicely. And, So, these books have gone through that process of hermeneutics, which means, analysing what is the time, place, circumstance. Because if you read Prabhupada's book still, you'll find that some things are still contradictory and they haven't been resolved. You understand? But they haven't been resolved for our understanding. The acharyas can understand it. Like one Mataji, she was very intent on finding out the meaning of sadhu sanga, sarva shastre kai. Nalmata sadhu sanga, sarva siddhi hai. Which means a moment's association with a pure devotee can give one complete perfection. And she took it literally. A moment's like 11th or 8th of a second. How can you get benefit, Just put hearing as a process. And she was asking everybody, all the gurus who were coming through and they were giving explanation, but she couldn't accept any of them. And then one day I was listening to a tape by Prabhupada and she asked exactly the same question. And Prabhupada said, it's like this. There's wet grass and dry grass. He said, if you try to set fire to wet grass, it will take forever. It'll take a long time. This is if you set fire, strike a match to dry grass, woof! He said, that's what it means. So if somebody is ready for devotional service and they want to hear, immediately they can actually get the benefit. So it went a completely different way. We were thinking in terms of time. Is time expanded? Is it relative? But even that moment meant that in a moment, very quickly we can understand. And so Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
His Holiness Dayananda Swami ki jai.